Hey Hotshots, Jess with Emotional Fire Academy here today with an expert chat with a wonderful friend of mine. We're going to be talking about emotional intimacy. Welcome to Emotional Fire Academy. This is a channel where we step into hero consciousness so that we can make suffering optional and do epic stuff with life. And this lady I am talking to today is definitely doing epic stuff with her life. Welcome, Alex Friedman. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. I love so much of the content you share and talk about, and I'm so honored to be able to come in and talk about emotional intimacy.
I know it's a really interesting topic. And I love, so just a brief intro on Alex. So Alex is the mama of ConnectionFeast, which is an incredible company that aims to improve social well-being through intentional conversations and cultivate more meaningful relationships with ourselves, each other, and the world. And she started this company in 2018 and is now co-founder and host of these wonderful Connection Feasts. And Alex, you are really living emotional intimacy, because that's what I experienced when I attended your first feast. So thank you for doing that. And I'm really excited for our chat today. So shall we jump into the conversation?
Let's jump.
All right. So I like to kind of define what something is, like the words, because linguistics can mean, a word can mean so many different things to so many different people. So what does emotional intimacy mean to you in terms of friendships? We're going to kind of put this in the container of friendships today.
Yeah. And I love being able to talk about how we apply it to friendships and how it can be a platonic element in our lives and why this is such a valuable conversation. So emotional platonic intimacy for me is the experience of being deeply connected to someone who knows and understands my most important feelings, and someone who also shares that with me. It's really as simple as that. And there isn't necessarily any physical or sexual intimacy, but it is a deep emotional platonic intimacy. And so that's what it is.
I had to actually look this up when we were when I was preparing for this conversation. Because immediately I went to the word vulnerability, and I think that is a huge part of it. But intimacy, intimacy is such a loaded word to so many people. So, and then to pair that with emotions, and the elements of trust, there's all these other nuanced kind of threads that kind of run through emotional intimacy, and also kind of intention. Our intention is, why are we being emotionally intimate? And as I was kind of percolating on that, it made me realize, like, when we perform it, it's an action, we expect a certain outcome. And so how does that factor into the conversation too? So thank you for bringing this word into the topic.
Yeah, it is a weird kind of concept to think of, like, what is emotional intimacy, right? And I think our culture, especially Western culture, because I know you have an international audience here, Western culture really has put this, I guess, shiny object around individualism, and also having intimacy with, like, potentially one or two people, whether it be relationships, these longer term, romantic relationship is intimacy. But there is a beautiful thing all around emotional intimacy within friendships. And what, like you pointed out, what creates those, and we can delve more into that. And we can delve kind of into, what it's not, is helpful, I think, as well, for me to see. It helped me see what the difference was. And I think I'll point out here, especially as our culture changes a little bit, less people potentially getting married at younger ages, and also way even before the pandemic, but it's now an even more prominent thing of loneliness and people craving deeper connection with people and themselves. And in order to create that, they're going to have more intimate relationships of all types. This actually helps them feel more connected to themselves, helps them feel more close to people. And we don't really have the skills. Our schools certainly don't teach them. And unless we're modeled them, it's really quite challenging to know what to do. So I think getting this practice within our platonic friendships of emotional intimacy is actually a beautiful thing and helps us prepare for even, more deep romantic relationships at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that kind of friendship as the primer for other relationships, because it feels like there's a little less pressure in friendships for certain outcomes, like in a romantic relationship, maybe there's, I expect to marry you, I expect to be with you forever. There's these expectations, whereas with friendships, the rules are a little looser. And so, yeah, it's a little bit, maybe feels like a safer container for emotional intimacy. Though it does hurt if you lose a friendship prematurely, it can be painful. So, so you bring up a good point. What is it not? Let's talk about that real quick. What is emotional intimacy not? I love the negative flip.
Yeah, because let's be honest, like emotional intimacy can be really different for some people. So I think that's why it is helpful to point out what it's not. I'll tell you this, it's not like a sense of shallowness in a relationship. And maybe you can mark that with things like if you're not recognizing or expressing your feelings, if you're not revealing personal details about yourself. And I'm not talking about like things you ate for dinner or what you did over the weekend, right? It's being vulnerable, more vulnerable, and letting people help you. This is emotional intimacy is if you let people. So if you're not letting people help you, that's a sign. If you're not comfortable with sharing attention with them or letting go of control with them, like letting somebody else plan, letting somebody else have the attention for an event, or if you're not listening to people without having to solve a problem, this would also demonstrate a lack of emotional intimacy. So I think those are really helpful because I think people are wanting to have more emotional intimacy, but don't know exactly what that means. And I think that with these examples of what it's not, it kind of also gives enough space for people to kind of have their own particular unique elements within that of what it feels like to let go of control, right? Is it about the planning? Is it not hearing back from somebody, like being, within a day and being a little bit more flexible and empathetic towards a situation, thinking about context of what might be going on for them. So it gives a little bit more flexibility for people to apply it in different ways that might apply depending on the relationship or who they're talking about or thinking about.
I love the concept of control, like relinquishing control as part of emotional intimacy. Because for me, what it's not is, and disclosure, I have revealed some things on my channel about, my own personal life. But I, in the past, have erred on giving away too much control and kind of I used to have an equation about, emotional intimacy means I can just vent all the time, all my problems to someone. And that was a really unhealthy pattern that I had that I recognized. So I think you can also, in the balance of, it's a balancing act, as is everything in life, everything in moderation, but being intentional about, not using emotional intimacy and turning it into emotional caregiving. And that's kind of one of the lessons that I've learned. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, but because because I've, had a problem with that probably the first, 20 or 30 years of my life. So, yeah, and that's interesting too of, where's that happy medium with emotional intimacy? What is the perfect amount?
Yeah. And I think letting go of control, and control is such an interesting concept, right? And I think we also, and maybe I can just speak more proactively here, like I could sabotage myself, not even on purpose, but by feeling like I'm because I feel more in control, right? Oh, this person, like didn't call me back at a certain time. And instead of actually bringing up my needs, which feels vulnerable, I'm actually going to avoid them. And I'm actually now in control of the scenario. That is a very, that is a self-sabotaging, not, and it depends on the scenario, of course. But in most cases that is self-sabotaging. What really is emotionally intimate for me is to share what my needs are and ask if somebody can meet those needs. And in a friendship, letting go of control is also allowing that person to say no. Or maybe they say, I can't feel, I want to support you in that. I'm not in a place in my life right now, but in a week.
Yeah.
That's another way of control, right? We just so that's an example I think is applicable for people might be able to relate to, maybe not, but you can apply it in different ways.
Yeah, you're approaching a breakdown in emotional intimacy with more emotional intimacy. I love that. I love that, like continuing to open and be more vulnerable. And because it's easy to walk away, right? When someone disappoints us, it's easy to cut ties. It's easy to walk away. It's easy to be like, to regain that control. You're totally right. And to take a step back and be like, is it worth it to me to go deeper into emotional intimacy in this situation, instead of retreating from it? I think that's a beautiful point, and something that we probably all are faced with all the time, in a lot of situations. So not just friendships, but even interacting with, all kinds of people in our life. So let me get back on track. I know we can kind of just take this conversation so many ways.
True.
Why do we sometimes fear being emotionally intimate in our friendships?
Ooh, this is really interesting. First, foremost, I think what we're talking about, I think a lot of people don't know how, or also they start to get really nervous, right? And a lot of just different relating skills takes practice. I think that when people aren't an expert in things sometimes, or it's unfamiliar, it naturally will bring a little fear. It could bring a little excitement for some people, but I think in general, when it's new, it's scary. There's also very specific things, I think that maybe people don't want to give the wrong impression, or maybe also if the other person takes it too far, they don't want that person to get the wrong impression. Meaning, for example, if I am a cis single straight woman and I have a male friend who's single and straight, I don't want to necessarily give the wrong impression that I like them, right? That could be something they're worried about. If even if I was in a relationship, maybe also I'm worried that I'll give somebody the wrong impression that I might be interested in them. So that's an example. Another one would be that they think that they get this already from the romantic relationship, and that they don't need to necessarily, so they're fearful, I don't need to get this from somebody else or anybody else. I get this all from my romantic relationship. So my fear here is this would be demonstrating that I'm not getting what I need in my own relationship. I have everything. They're my best friend, and we're really emotionally intimate, and that might be true. So we are fearful of what it might say about our relationship. I might just be scared. Like I said before, it's something new. Also, I don't know how the person's going to respond. What if I seem too needy? What if they don't reciprocate? Other things, just I avoid it altogether. I might not even be that emotionally intimate in my romantic relationships. And then I'm nervous I might overshare. I think that that's a big one, or overburden. I can certainly relate to this. Sometimes I feel like I don't want to be a nuisance is the word I use a lot. So that's an interesting word. It sounds like a child to me. And that's so, I think that those are a variety of reasons. Another thing is I brought this up before, we don't know how. This is not something culturally that is really exemplified, certainly not in media very much. Instead, in media, we're demonstrates that we're closeness with our romantic partners, mostly, that we don't necessarily have big friendship groups unless we're single. And also, our culture doesn't necessarily demonstrate what it looks like, even when we have these scenarios, and then just how it changes over time. And then I think people don't want to be rejected. This is the big one.
Yes. Yeah, it is a gamble, and image management is also, when I was thinking about this question, what came up for me was this payoff of how do I share, if I share too much, am I, is this person going to reject me? Am I going to be accepted for who I am? Versus if I hold back, I seem kind of mysterious. I find myself just being a straight woman, like always wondering what the guy is thinking. I know we're talking about friendships, but it's kind of extends to then all men. I've found in my life, like managing that. Well, I don't want to intimidate them, because I personally have had a lot of, very intense life experiences. I've been a firefighter. I've, traveled extensively, and I don't want to intimidate them. I have this story that like, I can't reveal too much because which is total, it's really at the end of the day bullshit, because I shouldn't worry about that. Like, to me, I think you can't be brave and, there's a balance between, you have to be really vulnerable and authentic, or you have to like hold back and be scared and kind of, craft this watered down version of yourself. And you got to pick one, you pick one and you see what happens. You see the result, the outcome of it and how but I less of that thinking, I think, as I've turned 40 and like just being like, it just doesn't pay anymore to be anything less than authentic, and accepting that, okay, if I revealed myself and this person wasn't interested, or was too much for them, or it intimidated them, or they rejected me, like, that's okay. And I think that's part of settling the fear of oversharing, settling the fear, calming it, is like coming back to self and being like, I was brave enough to be all of me. Like maybe that wasn't the right choice in that moment, but I was brave, like and really being proud of that and standing up for ourselves, and just being like, it's just not worth it to try and temper who I am, or temper my experiences, or temper what I'm feeling to, try to accommodate this image that I'm trying to construct of who I am and what I want to present to the world. So at least when it comes to, building a friendship, a relationship. But
yeah, and it's so interesting, because I will say a common kind of balance that I think people have with friendships, a couple things, right? Like, listen, coming out and saying, I'm just going to be myself and accept me for who I am. Absolutely. But there is a slight dance of letting a friendship evolve over time. It doesn't mean that you have to tell this person very boring, basic things from you. It is a balance of vulnerability, the right amount for someone to feel comfortable with you, but not so overwhelming that like, that might cause them to take a step back and wonder, wow, I have to protect my own space. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the part of really understanding this balance and getting practice, because I'll tell you this, when we all start dating, for example, it's not like nobody teaches us. We have to self-educate ourselves on how to do this. And that is also a balance. If we go on a date and we tell this person all these really deep, like traumatic things about us, they might empathize with us and they might be kind on the date, but they might not leave feeling like it was it could be a little draining, right? And so there is a balance between it. And also, I think that earning trust over time, it does happen, although we can feel an initial trust from the beginning, but there is just a balance of kind of over time. And then also I'll point out, I have noticed a lot of people feel rejection quickly, and they'll feel like they're initiating, they'll feel like they're putting the legwork in, it's not being reciprocated. Mm-hmm. And that might be true. Mm-hmm. And I think the difference here is then they're not the people for you, mm-hmm. right? And also not to take it as personally, which is so much easier said than done. Mm-hmm. But I do hear this as a common kind of thing. A lot of people will take it very personally if they initiate and people don't reciprocate mm-hmm. for friendship, right? Mm-hmm. And they start to overanalyze themselves. Truth of the matter is, it happens to all of us, and some people, just like dating, are able to like filter out those people faster than others. And so that you focus on who it is working with, and you continue to develop those friendships and less focus on what isn't working. And I think that is also a really important thing of like, why we fear it, because in the part of rejection, and then we keep focusing on what hasn't been working.
Yes.
Yeah, so I just wanted to point that out, because people don't want them to feel alone, and I don't want to discourage people from initiating, but it is kind of like a little bit of a dance, and be okay with not knowing that dance very well at first, and learning and practicing.
Yes, yes. And yeah, and being gentle on yourself through it, because we aren't taught and we aren't shown and we don't always know. And I think a lot of us form an expectation of how the friendship is going to go. Like we future pace, like, oh, I met this cool new person and this is what's going to, we're going to be best friends. And this is like, we project our expectations because we're creating our reality, to a certain extent with our imagination every day, whether we realize it or not. And so I think part of that rejection that we do feel is the having to alter that expectation. And I think when people realize that, it's like, not that I did anything wrong, like, like really soothing myself if someone, doesn't reciprocate, but just recognizing that like, maybe that friendship is going to show up in a different form than we expected. It's just going to play out. There's more of a surprise element, and that's okay. And allowing that and stepping into that and embracing that and being okay with it. And yeah. So.
Yeah. And I think also, I think trying different things. What I find interesting that people from emotional intimacy comes also with being emotionally intimate with ourselves. And I think you were saying that, that's what I heard. Like, for example, like being kind to ourselves and stuff, that's emotionally intimate. And so if we're not necessarily practicing it with ourselves, it's going to be hard to practice it with other people as well. I know we all have heard that. And you're like, no, I just want it to happen. Just tell me the steps to how to make it happen. I'll tell you how steps to make it happen. Compassion for yourself. Perhaps there's another word we could use, so it's not so overused at this case, but it's just very true. Because if we can't have that compassion for ourselves, we sure as no, we wouldn't talk like that out loud to somebody else. But for whatever reason, we talk to ourselves in a certain way. And I think what I've noticed, people complain about friendship building and being able to feel vulnerable, or that person couldn't handle it, this and that. And I think I'll ask them just a little bit more details, like they reached out to somebody and they haven't responded. And I'm like, what, did you invite them to something? Like what made, like, what's the incentive? And you are enough of incentive, but sometimes you need a little bit of something in the middle to help kind of balance it out. Is there a show? Is there an art thing that you want to go to? I don't know, like a cool outdoor sporting event that you just think would be cool to watch. Being that initiator is emotional intimacy. You're finding it, you're being proactive, and it's building over time. So I just want to point out there's this fear, and then it continues to like happen because people are repeating the same things that aren't working. Take a step back, try something new, and be a little bit more, emotionally intimate with things that interest you.
Yes. Change your strategy. If you're not getting what you want on a big scheme, if you can step back and look and say, I'm just not getting the results I want, change your strategy. We talk about this all the time on this channel, like change your strategy. You just have to try something different, and approach it kind of more experimentally. And then you will see results. A small tweak can definitely change that. So speaking of small tweaks and learnings, let's, what are your 3 biggest learnings with emotional intimacy in your personal life?
Yeah. When I created more space for like more kinds of intimacy in my life, my world expanded. I'm pausing because it's true. And as I learned about this type of relationships with people, and I prioritized it more often in my life, I was amazed to discover how much it like radically shifted how love was given and received. That is a huge lesson and learning for me, is that I feel so loved. I feel so connected with an immense amount of people, and love is given in so many different ways. For sure. I feel deeply loved by a lot of people. And sometimes those people are in my life for a short chapter. And sometimes they're in for many years. Sometimes I talk to them often, and sometimes, not for 6 months. But I think that once I changed my perspective, my world expanded on what does it really feel like to have deep, really meaningful connection? So that is one. Another big one would be that I've kind of learned is that Platonic emotional intimacy isn't just about having these strong friendships when I'm single, right? Or like having a backup for like when I'm single. It's for me, it's about maintaining these types of friendships or these deep connections as I've dated or as I've been in long-term relationships or more serious relationships, so that I have people I can turn to for different emotional needs, and that I've already kind of cultivated that. And I think that going to one romantic partner for all our emotional needs, well, that would be kind of thinking like I can go to a one friend for all of the things that I'm interested in. Basically just dating myself or only friends with myself because that's what that's saying, right? And I think I will have my friends I know will want to go to hot springs with me. Some friends like to hike. Some friends hate to hike. I have a variety, and and it's kind of like, it just shows me that I won't be dependent on one person necessarily. I can be interdependent on a lot of people, and also fulfill a lot of my own needs at the same time, and help somebody else fulfill theirs as well. And it's not necessarily just dependent on a romantic partner. And then I'd say the third would be, the more intimate I am with my friendships, it's actually helped me, or it's actually taught me some lessons that maybe we thought, or that I thought that I could only learn in romantic relationships. Now, this is an interesting concept and probably one of the biggest lessons for me. I think that so long that I have really delved into a lot of personal growth work of how much I've learned that one of the number one ways we can heal a lot of our own types of relationship issues or, grow is in relationship. So if we're hurt in relationship, we heal in relationship. And so even that concept, even that term for a long time could lead somebody, including myself, perhaps before I more practiced emotional platonic intimacy, thinking that, oh, I will need a certain type of relationship for me to actually heal this. Here's the truth that I've learned. I can actually heal this with a lot of these friendships. And I have, especially my male platonic, emotional, really emotionally intimate friendships, which, by the way, I have not dated any of my friends. It's never crossed that path on purpose. And when I've had a disagreements with them, or some sort of tension, I have noticed, for me specifically, that I feel different about that scenario. I'm more uncomfortable bringing up issues, more uncomfortable bringing up my needs than I am with some of my female friends. It's caused me to push me to have these tough conversations about my needs or about what isn't working, and crying in front of these people, which I wasn't always comfortable with before, has helped me heal a lot of some of these relationship dynamics within myself, helping me to become an even better partner, romantic partner. And I think those are 3 lessons for me that and learnings that have been really applicable. And obviously it's pretty vulnerable for me to share here, right? But I really feel like it's important for me to share that, to know that we can heal a lot of our own relationship issues, even just within any relationship.
Yes.
That's cool.
It is cool. It is. It's kind of like when the student is ready, the teacher appears, right? If you're open to that. I love those. Thank you for that vulnerability, that emotional intimacy. I appreciate, you sharing that, because it is kind of to, vocalize some of these things out loud is very intimate. So I appreciate that. And I really resonated with the open, being more open to the different forms of love, and to experience the whole like spectrum. It is kind of a spectrum, and instead of kind of these traditional pathways that I think, when we really fixate on, this I have to put all of this in my romantic partner, or the best friend role. That's another, like, my best friend has to, this is how they have to act towards me. And this is what I can, the amount of intimacy I can get in this relationship, and expanding that, kind of dissolving those old paradigms and expanding. So I liked that.
Yeah.
Sharing that.
You know what? And your comment just reminded me of something do you ever meet couples, like really old couples that have been together a really long time?
Mhm.
My parents have been together 52 years, but I will also ask couples like that who have been together, not what's their secret necessarily, because it's so cliche, right? But like, what have you learned about marriage that you didn't know before about this relationship? And one little thing that I think is so interesting to me is like, um, how much there's a pattern of people telling me that you're kind of accepting who the person is, and they will be many different people
Mhm.
because they evolve and change. And that is really interesting because somebody in that, and that happens in friendships, and I think accepting that that happens within ourselves. So people are with us, and applying that to friendships, you know, like if I wanted my friends to react the same way to my scenarios that they did when I was in my early 20s versus now when I'm 40, it's just different. I'm a different person. There's no way it can apply. It's different scenario, different timing. It's just, I wouldn't relate anymore to that scenario. Now they've aged with me. And so maybe they won't give me the same advice, but maybe they won't. Maybe they're not there yet. And the fact of the matter is people evolve and change. And sometimes we need to find people that are on that, on a, you know, a path that can help us relate a little bit more. Sometimes a different opinion is good. However, the thing I'm pointing out here is the evolution and how we change and how our needs change. And I think that being okay with that and realizing that I might need to get more emotionally intimate with people that can help me kind of ride this wave as I'm learning new things about myself.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love it. Yes, yes, that resonates deeply with me, and how important that is, and to again, like self, like compassion and appreciate, giving the other person in the friendship the same compassion of like they're evolving and growing too, and sometimes that means taking space. Sometimes emotional intimacy does mean taking space and coming back together at a different, leaving the door open for that potential when you're evolving in a similar direction again. And
Yeah.
so I have found my three biggest learnings. The first one is disclosing my intention. So going back to emotional intimacy is a tool that we use to get a certain outcome, right? Typically connection is that outcome. But when I feel a need to be vulnerable and share what I'm feeling, disclosing my intention to the other person so they kind of can frame what's coming. Because again, in my past, often I would do a lot of venting. And so now I'll say to the person, can I vent about this just for a couple of minutes? Or can I need to change my perspective. Can you help me change my perspective on this? Or I encountered a gal last night during a meetup who said, she prefaced the whole thing. She was leading the meetup and said, I'm learning how to show up for myself. So forgive me if this meetup doesn't go perfectly tonight. And I loved that it creates this vessel of expectation for the other person to respond to you. Or I need a solution, because when we don't do that, sometimes how the other person shows up for us and how the connection, the strength of the connection is in the shared goal, the shared outcome of the, I'm verbalizing something and I'm expecting this goal to happen. And so that kind of helps the other person meet you on the same page and then strengthen the connection. And so my second learning is then doing that for others, that for others and saying, what do you need? How can I support you in this moment? Do you just want to divulge this? Do you need to vent? Because I found being a coach, and especially someone who talks about emotions all day long, I will often go instantly into coach mode and not realize it. And that kind of creates a disconnect, because if that's not what the person wants and needs in that moment, it breaks the connection a little bit. It feels kind of like, I'm trying to give them advice and show them the way out, and they just want to be heard. And so I think doing that, reciprocating that for people is really powerful too, and helps the flow. It's all about maintaining that flow of intimacy, right? So it doesn't get thwarted because you're both expecting different things in the moment of the conversation, or, the outcome of the conversation. And I think the third thing is really again, acknowledging that if I am left, I will, in the past, like I turned a lot of friendships into emotional caregiving. And that was because I had this expectation that that's what it meant. It meant to show everyone everything about yourself. And that turned into a lot of bitching, just a lot of bitching and complaining and moaning about sometimes the same things for months. And that does deteriorate. It does become exhausting for the other party. And so using friendship, as a vessel for more forward facing, my dreams, my goals, what I want to create, and, just kind of making sure there's balance, making sure it's not just, I'm expressing being victimized all the time. But again, both people have to be on the same page of that. Both people have to be bringing that into the conversations and growing, focusing on growth. It's that fixed versus growth via the quality of your communications. Someone. So those are
amazing. And I love how specific they are. And I think that's a great kind of exercise for people to really think of, like what are like, how do you like being emotionally intimate with people, or what are signs that someone is being emotionally intimate with you? And one thing I thought of while I was listening to your list there, what you kind of pointed out with is, that they are really listening, that's supportive in the growth. It reminded me of like, even if they don't agree with your decisions or something, that perhaps they're still supportive, right? And I think that is another sign of emotional intimacy, right? Like they might have a different way of looking at it, it sounds like, but that they still support you in your journey.
Yes.
And that's important to you. And I think that's like, people can agree to disagree, but it doesn't mean that they're any less of a friend or any less valuable. It's just that like you could still feel like, listen, this is what I feel like is right for me. Can you support me in this growth? And I think absolutely a beautiful example. So I think it was really cool to hear.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for your kind words. I appreciate them.
Affirmation. I'm a love language affirmation. It's become obvious. Company all around conversations.
I love it. I'm the same. That's one of my biggest my biggest love languages as well.
Yeah. Oh, good to know.
So Alex, if you could leave us with one, from your experience in creating this amazing company and fostering all of these incredible conversations that you do, what's your number one tip for cultivating emotional connection with someone new, maybe that you're just meeting for the first time, a new friend, a stranger? What's your tip?
My tip is curiosity. I think that's my number one tip, is really practice being curious about other people, about this person. And that is demonstrated through a variety of ways, but number one being asking questions, thoughtful, intentional questions, really listening, being present, and being genuinely curious, not interrogative, but genuinely curious about that person would be my number one suggestion on how to create deeper connection and the like spark of emotionally platonic intimate friendship is to be curious. And it's a beautiful gift to give someone, even if that means that we are doing that for a brief time and without the expectations that it will unfold into anything more. Because when people are really genuinely curious in that moment, you can feel that.
Oh, yeah.
A shift happens, right? And so that's my number one tip of how to ignite that.
Yes. And you then meet them where they're at, right? You're instantly kind of, again, it's a common goal, it's a shared goal. It's your curiosity of just kind of diving into who they are and asking questions. Yes, I love it. I love that tip. It's great.
It's a good one. I'm biased. It's a good one. It's a good one. And I think being curious, it's hard. We're rushed. And there's definitely skills around that as well. But I think asking questions, repeating back what you hear, using body language that demonstrates curiosity, and asking follow-up questions that help dig a little bit further, and then relating if we can. Those are all really great things that I've learned as a way to start opening up the door for more intimate platonic connections. So try it out.
Yes, yes, we will. I challenge everyone to try it out. I heard once that approach everyone as if they're already your close friend. I heard that probably 20 years ago, and I have lived by that ever since. I was like, that's brilliant. Because I used to have a lot of social anxiety of, oh my gosh, this person, what they expect of me. And the minute I did that, and I've done it ever since. And I think that kind of ties in with what it dovetails with your advice, because you are curious about your friends, someone you're already friends with. Like, what have you been doing? What have you been up to? And when you approach a stranger with that energy of, I'm already your friend, it really, you bypass all the superficiality. That's what I've found. Like, you go right to, they sense that and they feel comfortable and they trust you. It's this immediate rapport that is built, and they open up to you as if they're already your friend, and then you can kind of skip the awkward parts.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah.
We have like, how do you do that? How do you approach somebody you don't know? Like as if they're already your friend? Is it something you embody? Is it a certain way you ask questions, or do you have an example of how you do that?
It's an embodiment. It's embodiment. It's actually like, I'll lean in and, ask them a question like, how's your mom doing? Like I will just ask them things that I would ask any other, friend, an established friendship.
Oh, I love that.
Going right for those kind of questions, like takes people, it's very disarming to people. Like they're not used to that level of intimacy that fast, but it's like a pleasant surprise. They're like, yeah, she's, my mom's great. they'll respond with the same level of intimacy. So yeah, it's an embodiment in body language. And it's also asking the sort of questions I would ask in an established friendship. So
yeah. Oh, great. I love that. I'm going to totally borrow that.
And it works. Yeah, it's worked very well, but I love, and your curiosity plays right into it because, I care, I care about my friends and I'm curious about what they're doing. And that same, you can have that, for a stranger, like, and asking these bigger questions, these more meaty questions that you only reserve for your good friendships, asking it to a stranger, and they will open up. They'll open up. You just melt into your hands, and then, but within an hour, you are best buds. So it does work. So.
Yeah, good. I love that. Thank you for that.
Yeah. So Alex, how can people find out more about you and ConnectionFeast?
Yeah. So come to ConnectionFeast.com, check out our events. We have virtual and in-person experiences and events. People all around the world come. We have virtual deep discussions that are based around a specific theme. And then we also have workshops we put on, as well as game nights, which are a really beautiful way to connect. And we collaborate with a company called Broadly Entertaining for that. So you can come to our website and check out upcoming events. We also have some in-person events in some select cities, and we'll be rolling out more. And then, become part of our community. We also have a membership. This is helping invest in your own social wellness by helping support the mission here of creating a movement to create deeper connection. When you become a member, you get invited into the Discord group and into our directory, which we're still growing in the sense of figuring out all the tech stuff, but it is a great opportunity to get in the early beginning stages and help build this community while creating community. And so go to ConnectionFeast.com or Instagram, it's ConnectionFeast. We're pretty active there. I try to make videos, entertaining videos to the best of my ability, and sign up for our email list. We also send out lots of tips and all that jazz. So come connect with us and DM me if you have questions about how to connect deeper with people. If you ever want some tips, feel free to drop into my DMs on ConnectionFeast. And I would love to give you some feedback. That is an offering I would love to give your audience here. If you just want some tips, I'm happy to pass that your way.
Thank you. We love that. Thank you. We're all about, connection is it's a big part of being a human. And that's, we're aiming to improve here. All of us are aiming to improve and grow at Emotional Fire Academy. So thank you for that generous offer. And I can't speak more highly of the feasts. They are tons of fun. I've been to them myself, and so I give you my gold star recommendation to check out the feast. I love the format, the food. It is a feast. It is a feast of connection. It really is what it says it is. So delivers.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And thank you everyone for watching. I appreciate it. And thanks for the interview today. I really love learning about you and getting more emotionally intimate with you, as we've, chatted many times now.
Yes, it was awesome. Thank you again, Alex. And if you liked what you saw today, if you have a comment, drop a comment below. Let us know what you thought, and check out Alex's information in the description box. And thanks for watching, everyone. We'll see you next time.